as we travel the roads to romance.
Sun and sand, sagebrush and tumbleweed, rolling mountains and giant cactus. This is the old Santa Cruz Trail, running from Santa Cruz in Old Mexico to Tucson. Here the Tumacacori National Monument stands, preserving the ruins of Tumacacori Mission. Another mission, San Javier del Bac, stands on a slight hill facing south across the Santa Cruz Valley. Work on this magnificent shrine was started in the early 1700s. Not far from busy Tucson, an exact replica of old Tucson has been built as a motion picture location. Children of the Carrillo School in Tucson re-emphasize that the Santa Cruz Valley is the blending place of many cultures. This is a Mexican Christmas festival. When the pageantry of the festival is done, there is candy for all who scramble for it. You and your family can enjoy the vacation thrills of this spot, and no matter where you live, you can reach it quickly, comfortably, and with utmost economy. Travel this year the roads to romance, to places you have always wanted to go. And when you travel, go in one of the quality motor cars your Chevrolet dealer has to offer. It will be your magic carpet that will carry you to the land of your heart's desire.
Good evening and welcome to another session of the Arizona Hip Historian Virtual Happy Hour Tour. We are so glad that you could join us this evening. My name is Brenda Holt and I am the Associate State Director for Community Outreach and Advocacy for the Arizona State Office. AARP is the largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that is dedicated to empowering people to choose how they live as they age. And in an effort to do that, for the month of January, we are featuring a theme we call Working Jobs. And this is meant to help anyone who is currently looking for a job, maybe looking to change jobs, maybe to change careers. We have resources and innovative tools to help you do just that. So you can find out more information about the AARP Working Jobs resource at www.aarp.org/work. Now, let's get to tonight's event. Hello, Marshall.
Folks, welcome to the show. Get ready to meet your host for the night, Arizona's very own hip historian himself, Marshall.
Well, hello, everyone. I want to welcome you all. Oh my gosh, so excited that I jumped the gun a little bit, but it's all good because we've got so much fun to share this evening. So I know the weather right now here in Arizona is that perfect, like during the day, 70 degrees, where, a long sleeve shirt, maybe a jacket. So when the sun goes down, it's all nice and cozy. So I want to welcome you to Arizona History Happy Hour on January 21st of 2021. Now, I know we have folks out there on Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube watching us. So we're getting ready for some fun this evening. So I want to welcome you all here. Now, what can you expect if this is your first time here? Well, we're going to do a little bit of trivia. We have an amazing guest coming up. We also do something called Little Arizona, where we talk about a small town in Arizona, as well as some Arizona music history and a show and tell, because I have a house full of stuff that has all kinds of stories in it. So we get to share some of that. So if this is your first time here, you might be wondering, who is that man on my screen? Well, my name is Marshall Shore. And how did I get here? Well, a little over 21 years ago, I was working in a library in Brooklyn, and actually it was a beautiful little Carnegie building. And, there was a little bit of snow, a little bit of wind, a lot of slush, and I decided it was time to change all of that and come to someplace sunny. And that indeed was Phoenix, Arizona. Now, when I first got here, I was working in South Phoenix at the Harmon Library, which was a 1950s library building, which has since been demolished, and a beautiful new library is just around the corner from it. But that community had lots of oral history of how the community got to where it was. And so for me, that was really important as a newcomer. And I realized that helped ground me. And I realized that also around town, no one else was doing that. So I started talking to people and retelling their stories. And, we got here via a big orange cube, a U-Haul. And, their international world headquarters are right here in the Valley of the Sun. Now, when we got here, we probably moved into a little 1956 ranch. When we moved in, it was all kinds of shades of beige. I'm happy to say now it is just a very simple two-tone of seafoam and cantaloupe. Now, there's what my kitchen looks like today. Let's get a closer look at that. Look at all that buttercream yellow tile. That matching in-the-wall oven. If you look really close, you'll notice that there's no window in the door. And I love the fact that my push buttons for the stovetop are inset in the wall. That's still what my kitchen looks like today. Now, when I got here, all I kept hearing about how there was no history here. But I knew that wasn't true because every time I went somewhere, whether it was on bike, on foot, in my car, I kept running across so many amazing people, places, and stories. And then there's that post-war boom that I think in a lot of ways made the Arizona that we all know and love today. All those GIs that either were stationed here, trained here, or passed through on their way to somewhere else. And after the war, they were moving here in huge numbers, looking for housing, in some cases just like mine. Now, I'm also known as the hip historian. You might wonder, how does one get a name like the hip historian? Well, every year on February 14th, we have a celebration here in Arizona for Statehood Day. And back in 2012, we had one heck of a statewide celebration, stuff going all over the place. And on that February 14th, at the Capitol, they put a main stage and all kinds of vendors. And so they let me talk about anything I wanted to for 15 minutes. And I chose to talk about something called Mask of the Yellow Moon. Now, when they were trying to describe me to other folks, there's also the official state historian, Marshall Trimble. And people, because we have the same first name, kept confusing us. And so I had a friend who was like trying to distinguish the two of us. And she said, he's the hip historian. And so that's when I grabbed that moniker and I said, thank you so much. And so we talked for 15 minutes about Mask of the Yellow Moon, which was an event that happened here in the Valley that was touted right up there with Mardi Gras as something that everyone in the country should go and see. It ran from 1926 to 1955, had about 5,000 high school and college students performing and keeping the show going at its height. And I was lucky enough to find three dresses in a box. And so I was able to convince three amazing friends to put on these late 30s dresses and walk around on stage as I got to talk about Mask of the Yellow Moon. And, that's really a lot of what I was doing did a lot of tours, a lot of lectures. And, in this moment, that's all been canceled. Well, almost. We've started doing a second Saturday fully masked tour of downtown Phoenix, where we all are wearing masks, and my co-host Deb and I wear microphones, so that way people can hear what we're saying without being that close to us. So we're all socially distanced. Now, if you'd like to reach out, you can do that on Facebook, Marshall Shore Hip Historian. You can also reach out on Instagram, Hip Historian, or even good old-fashioned email works, and that is hello@hiphistorian. Now, if you're watching on Facebook, I'll ask you to click on that little share button at the bottom of your screen so that all your friends can know how much fun we're having. So we're getting ready for some show and tell. And so tonight we actually have on as a guest a playwright who does a myriad of other things. And so my friend Steve Schimmel actually had a theater troupe here from the late 70s through the mid to late 80s. And so this was one of their productions, as is. It actually was on Broadway in the mid 80s. And the production that they did here was done the following week. It's like basically it closed there and then boom, it opened up here because it was directed by a friend of Steve's, Todd Patterson. And so it was Janus Theater Troupe that was doing this. And so it was the first LGBT or gay theater in the Valley, likely the state. And when they were looking for homes, they were having trouble because of what they were doing. And so they had a couple different places they would perform. So one of them was with the Black Theater Troupe. Helen Mason heard they were having troubles and basically said, "Hey boys, why don't you come over here?" And so they were able to perform in the same location as the Black Theater Troupe. They were also able to perform in a building that is now the Great Arizona Puppet Theater, which at that point was a building we almost lost when they were building the tunnel or the highway. And then this had actually been purchased as part of that. And we almost lost this building, but they chose not to. And so Janus Theater Troupe was able to use this. Now, Janus had 35 productions in 8 years, from 79 to 87. What a legacy that is. Now, of course, it would not be a happy hour if there wasn't a cocktail. And I'm always happy to say that, PJ and the crew over at the Hotel Valley Ho, they have outdone themselves this time. And let's see, we're actually going to do this. Actually, no, we're not. We're going to do this because, tonight we're going to be talking about Waltz and Ladmo, and we'll explain what that is for some of you, because, to those that grew up here, it is one of those sacred things. Well, the Hotel Valley Ho, their pool is called the O Pool. And so they created a Ladmo bag drink that's kind of like an adult Capri Sun. You just stick the straw in. And there you go. Now, when they developed this drink, PJ was saying that people loved it so much. Well, the staff loved it so much that they are going to serve it by the pool. So you can actually now, if you didn't get a Ladmo bag, you can now have your chance at a Ladmo bag. Now, it's got all kinds of things in it. It's got rum, it's got banana, it's got lemon juice. Ancho Reyes Verde, bitters, orgata, and some pineapple juice, which is it's super tasty and would be oh so delightful sitting by the pool. Now, I am thrilled to say that we have a special guest. So let me bring on Ben. Hello, Ben.
Hi there. How you doing? Why
I'm-
do people always wave on the internet? I don't know. I guess it means I'm here. So,
It's
hi,
here.
Marshall.
My camera's working. I have sound, so it's all good.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, Ben, so tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you've been around the valley for quite some time.
Meh. You know, here's how I like to think about it. You were talking about statehood. Arizona became a state in 1912. I was born here in 1956. Arizona is about 48 years older than me. And 48 years is a long time, but to me, 48 years seems like, oh, yeah, it was like yesterday. So anyway, I have found myself in the position over the last probably 20 years or so that I have a very strong desire to, as you're doing in a different format, Marshall, to tell contemporary Arizona history via live theater as a play or a musical. And I've had success. I've had success in straight plays and musicals completely solely based on Arizona. And it's been one of the great joys of my life.
Indeed. So I know you did one about Barry Goldwater.
I did. That was my first. No.
Oh,
Take that back. That was my second. Yeah, Barry Goldwater. And he was with us at the time. I sent him the script. He invited me up to his house. I was sitting there in his living room in his house up on the hill. It was, I felt like I was in a living iconic situation. And I had sent him the script, and all I wanted from him was his approval, to say, yeah, go ahead. Even though legally I didn't need it, I wanted him to look at it. And he was just awesome. To this day, I own a flak jacket that Barry Goldwater wore when he was flying airplanes over to China to support World War II. He gave that to me. And so that was,
wow.
I get goosebumps just thinking about it now. Anyway, so writing theatrical pieces about contemporary Arizona history is my thing. And when I say contemporary, what I mean is events that occurred within the living memory of people who are still with us.
Okay, so with that, so I know we're going to talk a lot about Waltz and Ladmo. So for those folks that may have grown up in Tucson or outside of Phoenix, who were Waltz and Ladmo, or what was Waltz and Ladmo, other than an icon? And
well, I hope that we have I posted this on the Wallace and Ladmo pages on Facebook, so I hope we have some fans watching. But for those of you who, as Pat used to say, just moved here last week, the Wallace and Ladmo show was a children's television program that existed longer than any other children's television program. Every market, every city used to have its own TV program. And they were usually hosted by what I would call uncles, cowboys, clowns, and spacemen. Now, I want to tell you, Marshall, that I have researched this topic a lot because I curated an exhibit of Wallace and Ladmo at the Arizona Historical Society. What Wallace did that was brilliant is that he was parodying all those other kid shows at the same time. He had a superhero who was an egomaniac, not unlike our former president. He had an old lady who told stories, who had just a sick, twisted, demented, loved to make Ladmo cry, a spoiled rich kid who would constantly make social commentary on people who lived in certain areas of Phoenix that you could not do in a million years on television today. So he came up with an idea for a show that parodied every other kid show on the air at that time. And that is my, I'm sorry, I tried to make a brief answer about what was the Wallace and Ladmo show.
But yeah, it ran for 30 plus years.
Yes, it ran for 37 years, I believe. Oh God, I hope I got that right.
That's why I didn't draw out an exact number, because I'm so bad with numbers.
I got that wrong. But it was, I mean, you look at the clips from those shows, and, you know, for a period of time, I worked for the Wallace and Ladmo show as a writer and played characters on the show. And, oh my gosh, we used to have a character called the Angry American at that time. And he was complaining about the shrinking size of the Ladmo bag. And the reason it was shrinking is because instead of putting actual items into it, they were putting coupons. And this was at the height of our first gas crunch. And I was raging on this thing. And I said, so now we have this Ladmo bag. We have these coupons. We're back in our cars, burning gas and helping all the Arabs. Now, that was on a kids' TV show. I can't believe they let us do that.
So you'll be happy to know that Chris chimed in and said 35 years.
Thank you, Chris.
So exactly.
He's good for something, apparently.
So yeah, I knew somebody would chime in with the exact years. So, he actually even does one better and gives exact dates. So thank you, Chris.
You're the only one.
I highly doubt that.
Okay, all right.
So, all right.
It's a long story.
So, okay, so we're going to do some trivia. Now, we do trivia a little differently. Unlike most trivia where it's all about what you know and you don't get to learn anything, we actually will go through trivia. It's all multiple choice. So all you got to do is pick an answer, whether it's right or not. But then we'll take a little bit of a music break when we're done and talk about some Arizona music history. And then we'll launch into the answers, but even better, the stories of those answers. So it's going to be a fun show. And Chris may not learn anything from these.
No.
But I know a ton of other folks. I know there were things in there I didn't realize. So... all right, so let's get the ball rolling. Now you can some of you have a chat session, and so you are welcome to keep track of your answer there. You can keep track of if you have a sandwich and a mustard squirter, you can keep track of your answers on your sandwich. Whatever you would like, whatever makes you happy, you go for it.
Yeah, I am down with the mustard squirter.
So although I know I would wind up wearing it, so I would never attempt to do that.
Okay.
Because it would just be a big old mess. All right. So our first question, actor, writer, producer, and creator of the Wallace and Ladmo show, Bill Thompson, created the character of Wallace when he first appeared on a different Phoenix kids TV show. Was it A, Cooper the Copper Miner? I'm glad I didn't drink too much, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to say that one.
That is a tough one.
It is. Or the Silver Shine Sammy. Or C, Gold Dust Charlie. So one of those had Bill Thompson on as a character. All right. So question 2. When Bill Thompson got his own show on KPHO in 1954, its original theme song was A, Hold That Tiger. And yes, I know some of you are probably singing it right now, but not time for that. B, The Oriental Blues. C, Never Hit Your Grandma with a Skillet. I hear that was a popular tune in all the juke joints around town.
It was. And,
Yeah.
and I want to point out, at that point in time, there were very few grandmothers who had been beamed by a skillet. So it had a positive effect.
All those poor grandmas. All right. Before he became the Ladmo of Walson Ladmo, Vladimir, and I will let you pronounce his last name because...
It's Kwiatkowski.
Oh, I would not have said Kwiatkowski.
Yeah.
I've never heard anyone say his last name.
Yeah.
Okay. What was his job at KBHO before he became Ladmo? A, was he the janitor? B, the film or the video editor? C, the camera operator? Which one of those was Ladmo's job at KPHO first? Question 4. One of Pat McMahon's earliest and first regular appearing characters was A, Aunt Maud, B, Captain Zumar, or C, Gerald? What was one of Pat McMahon's earliest and his first regular appearing character? All right. Question 5. Another of Pat McMahon's early characters on the Walt Sudmo show was Elmer Blisco. His occupation was that of A, philanthropic philatelist.
There's another one.
I know. It's like, depending on what happens, it's like good thing I didn't drink too much of my Ladmo bag yet. B, the world's shortest giant, or C, the caveman inventor? All right. Question 6. Just before Captain Super would make his appearance on the show, Wallace would summon him with a magic wand and the secret word justice. Now he had 2 sworn enemies, communist and who? Was it A, Freddie Allswell, B, Eddie Boswell, or C, Teddy Falswell? Again, good thing I didn't drink too much yet. Or that could be problematic. All right, question 7. Wallace's actual name was Bill Thompson. His uncle was very successful in mining and became known as the Copper Baron of Arizona, who donated land for public use. Today it is known as, is it A, the Benjamin Thompson Wild Horse Preserve, B, the Bernard Thompson Trail, or C, the Boyce Thompson Arboretum? Which one of those did Uncle Bill donate? All right, question 8. Ladmo was a huge fan of baseball, and he was a pretty good player. In fact, he was scouted by a professional Major League Baseball team, and that team was A, the Cleveland Indians, B, the St. Louis Cardinals, C, the New York Yankees. Which team was recruiting Ladmo? All right, question 9. Pat McMahon appeared on the Wallace and Ladmo show as a rock and roll singer hubcap with his band The Wheels. They made an appearance one day on one of the most popular national TV shows of the day. Was it A, Shindig, B, American Bandstand, or C, The Steve Allen Show? Which show did they appear on nationally as hubcap and The Wheels? All right, question 10. Which of the following celebrities did not make a guest appearance on the Wallace and Ladmo show? A, Alice Cooper, B, Muhammad Ali, C, Don Rickles, D, Michael Nesmith, E, Davy Jones, or F, Orson Welles? Who of that list did not make a guest appearance on the Wallace and Ladmo show? All right. While you're all sitting there getting your answers together, whether you've eaten your sandwich or not, it's okay. So it's all good. We're going to go through a little bit of music history right here in Arizona, which we have tons of. And so we're going to talk a little bit about Duane Eddy. So Duane Eddy was raised in Coolidge, and he got a job as a disc jockey at KCKY, the local radio station there. And he met Lee Hazelwood. They became good friends and developed a partnership and produced 2 songs that were huge hits. And so that really, as people like to say, the twang heard round the world with Rebel Rouser and Peter Gunn. He then went on to create all kinds of twang-related records. I think probably my favorite is Twistin' and Twangin'. I've yet to hear that one, but I bet it's quite humorous.
You just like the title.
Oh, I love the title. I can only imagine twisting to basically rockabilly. So, which I think sounds like a hoot, and I'm completely up for it. So now he did this. So Ben, so how did Lee Hazelwood get that iconic twang?
Well, I would like to answer that question with the way it was explained to me. In the late 80s and into the probably late 90s, I used to do a lot of voice work, commercial voice work, radio commercials, voiceovers, things like that. And the engineer that I worked with the most was a guy named Jack Miller. And Jack Miller was a freaking national legend in audio engineering. I did not know this at the time. But he told me that I walked into his studio one day and there were all these old reel-to-reel tapes and a lot of them said Duane Eddy on it. And I said, what are you doing with all this Duane Eddy stuff? And then he launched into this story where he told me how Duane Eddy got his sound. And Jack Miller is not a man who exaggerates. I believe this story 100%. He was just solid as a rock. So he told me that Lee Hazelwood went out and bought a 200-gallon water tank and brought it in to the back of Arizona Recording, which was a famous, nationally famous, became a nationally famous studio because of Duane Eddy, and set this water tank up back there, and they put Duane Eddy's amplifier and the microphone inside of the water tank. And Jack told me that his job was he had a 2x4 with a hook on the end of it, and the engineer would shout out the back door of the studio, push it closer, pull it further away to get the microphone in the exact right spot so they could get this sound. Now, it's funny because when you hear Duane Eddy, and I would encourage you, by the way, to go to YouTube and other places, buy his music and listen to it, because it's a sound that most of us are familiar with now. But at the time, oh my God, nobody had heard anything like it. Rockabilly was big, but Duane Eddy was kind of somewhere halfway between rockabilly and standard rock and roll. And he came up with a sound that just lit up the radio. And at that time, of course, there was no internet. The radio was where you heard contemporary music. And what Lee Hazelwood and Duane Eddy managed to do with this is what I love about this story, is that it's so crude, it's so basic, it's a DIY way to sell 1 million records, and that's what they ended up doing. If you ever go to the MIM, which is the Musical Instrument Museum, you will see a mock-up of the water tank. They don't have the real water tank because in my research, what I discovered is they built a new studio and they built it around the water tank. So when they stopped using the water tank, they couldn't get it out of the building, so they cut it up into pieces and hauled it away. Such is the deal. But I love that story about Duane Eddy. Rebel Rouser, Peter Gunn, and the third one is Because They're Young, which was the theme song for a film, 1950s teenage film. But oh my gosh, it's just such a great story.
It is indeed. And yet again, how Arizona music changed the landscape.
Oh yeah. It put Arizona on the map because for a period of time, Duane Eddy was it. And, it's funny. People don't have the ear for instrumentals anymore, but that was most of what he did. They weren't, there were no lyrics. It was just music. It was rock music. It was, like I said, rockabilly kind of music. But oh my God, they were huge. By the way, I should say that Rebel Rouser is the ringtone on my telephone. I know we can't play the music, but it just
exactly. I know we talked about that at length, and I was like, I don't want to risk it.
Sure. But it had this resonance that was just, oh my God, you could feel it in your chest. It was just it took the music industry by storm.
And I remember as a kid, the first time I heard Peter Gunn, it's like, what is that?
Yeah.
I've never heard anything like that.
Yeah. He developed a technique, and I don't claim to be an expert on this, but he developed a technique of playing lead on the lower strings. And that is where you get more reverberation and that real fat sound like Peter Gunn.
Oh, and it looks like Jason in the chat may have put the link to Rebel Rouser.
Oh, there we go.
So perfect. Since we can't play it or anything like it.
There's your doorway.
So exactly. So one thing I do love is that Duane Eddy is admitted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
As he should be.
I agree. So Nancy's asking about Rodeo Records. That would be a Johnny D question, I think.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, because I don't know anything about Rodeo Records.
I do know that Duane Eddy did most of his early popular stuff on an obscure record label called Jamie, Jamie. And if you're looking on YouTube for recordings of his music, that is the label that you'll see most times is Jamie Records.
Well, I know when I was looking for some of the albums, I was like, Jamie, let's see if I can pull that up. Yeah, so you can see like up here in the corner, it's talking about Jamie.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I've never even heard of that record label before. So
I feel certain they did not have a bigger artist than Duane Eddy in their stable.
I'm sure they did not at all.
Yeah.
They were probably very excited to have someone who was making money.
Yeah. That is what it's about, isn't it?
So indeed. All right. So indeed, we've arrived at that time where it's time for some answers to those thought-provoking questions that some of them may be old hat to some of you, but to some folks, it may be brand new information about just kind of that culture that is Phoenix. All right. So actor, writer, producer, and creator of the Wallace and Ladmo show, Bill Thompson, created the character of Wallace when he was first on Gold Dust Charlie.
Gold Dust Charlie is one. Oh, well, I should say Ken Kennedy. Ken Kennedy is who played Gold Dust Charlie.
I never knew that.
Yes. He is one of those Arizona character in real life, who just made this place so unique. He actually had an Old West set. He had film experience. He talked KPHO into giving him a a kid show. You know, back then they called these guys cartoon jockeys because that was basically, they were selling product and showing cartoons and doing some, sketch material in between. But he had that show on. It was the only one in town. At that time, KPHO, when it was the first station in Phoenix, could carry ABC, CBS, NBC, and Dumont, a network that no longer exists, all at the same time. So they could just cherry pick whatever show they wanted to show from those 4 networks.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was something. And it was a golden time for KPHO. So putting Ken Kennedy on with a kid show and some scrappy cartoons, crazy cat cartoons, was not a big risk. And it turned out to be a really great show. And Wallace was doing graphic arts at the time and just kept nagging Ken, I want to be on the show, I want to be on the show, I want to be on the show. So he finally let him come on, and he played his nephew, a character named, and this is another little FYI, Wallace's last name, Sneed. Wallace Sneed was supposed to be Goldwater's nephew from back east, and came out to live and work with his uncle, Gold Dust Charlie.
Now, Chris says that Ken Kennedy also was a bullfighter in the 50s.
So was Wallace.
Oh, well, there you go.
Not in the 50s, but in the 60s. There's a lot of black and white film of Wallace and some small stakes bull rings, but out there with a cape and the bull and the whole thing. And I'm sure that Ken probably inspired that for him.
I would assume so.
That is such a wonderful piece of music. You heard that sort of, it's backwards. Shaving a haircut 2 bits usually comes at the end of a song. In this case, it's bump-a-da-ba-dum. And instead of hearing bump, bump, you would hear bump-a-da-dum. It's Wallace. A really unusual name for a show, because It's Wallace had a question mark at the end, as if, could this be Wallace? It's Wallace. It was a question. And anyway, that was the original theme song. And I never asked Wallace this question, but I have to believe that there was no coincidence in the fact that Ernie Kovacs, if you have anybody's watching, fans of early television comedy, Ernie Kovacs was a genius. And he used Oriental Blues for the closing credits on his TV show. So you would hear that song play at the end of Ernie Kovacs. And I have to believe that Wallace was a fan of that show. It was a lot of sight gags. It was a lot of really crazy stuff. And I think it would have been right up his alley.
Indeed. And then what became the next theme song?
Yeah. Well, that was written by Mike Condello. Ho, ho, ha, ha, he, he, ha, ha.
All right, and let's see if
genius.
Facebook will let us actually play it. We shall see.
Come on, Facebook.
I know. I'm like, come on.
There we go. You know, Marshall, in 2004, the 50th anniversary of the Wallace and Ladmo show going on the air, they had a float in the Fiesta Bowl parade. And there was a marching band that led the float, that preceded the float in the parade. And they played that. And to hear that song played by a marching band was, okay, thank you, Facebook. You can go away now. What the heck? Anyway, to hear that song played by a marching band, and then when they got to the ho ho ha ha break, everybody in the marching band put down their instruments and went ho ho ha ha hee hee ha ha as they're marching down Central Avenue. It was glorious.
I'm sure it was. That sounds hilarious.
Yeah, I got a videotape of it.
Nice. All right. So before he became a Ladmo, he had an earlier job at KPHO, and that was as a camera operator.
Imagine trying to do an hour kids TV show all by yourself. Now, you've got cartoons, which make up maybe 20 minutes, but carrying the whole load by yourself would have just been, I couldn't imagine it. So Wallace talked Ladmo, who was his cameraman, into, and I don't think it took much persuasion, lock down the camera, walk around in front of the camera. We'll do a bit. When the bit's over, you walk back around behind the camera, and on we go. And that's how he got started. And for a while, he was being salaried as a cameraman, but doing the Wallace and Ladmo show for free because it was fun. But, you know, once again, as we were talking about Dwayne Eddy and that echo chamber thing, he sometimes adversity forces you into more creative solutions than you would ever come up with.
Right. Well, and, you know, and back to your earlier statement about how the host of these fit into categories, it was like I grew up in Indiana and we had Cowboy Bob.
There you go. There you go.
So it was one man and he did the show by himself. That was the format pretty much. Mm-hmm. It's like looking back now, I understood why he interviewed like every single Cub Scout that would be on the show, because he was just happy to get a break.
Where are you from? What's your mom do? What's your dad do? Yeah, sure.
Right. Exactly. It didn't matter as long as it wasn't just him talking. So, yeah. So, and that was across the country. I mean, Chicago folks had Bozo.
Every town, I mean, towns much smaller than Chicago, everybody had their own kids' TV show. And as you know, the way Pat McMahon used to put it, and still does, I'm sure, is that it would be someone from the sales department who would get paid an extra $50 a week to put a sock over his hand and stand there and say, "Hey, boys and girls, make sure you brush your teeth after every meal." You know, and the only reason kids watched those shows was to see the cartoons. They didn't give a crap about the host. It was just to watch the cartoons.
Right.
And that's why the Wallace and Ladmo show was the last show standing, the last show to go off the air of a local kids TV show. 1989 was long in the tooth to still be doing that because cartoon packages were much cheaper.
Right. Open Vera says Denver had Fred and Faye.
There you go.
Everybody had their own local folks doing this.
The thing is, and I make no apologies for this, what made us different is we had the best one.
True.
We had the best one.
Well, and I liked Channel 3 every once in a while would just show some of the Wallace and Ladmo on air with no rhyme or reason. They would just show up. So it's like in the morning, I was always like scouting to see. It's like, okay, is there going to be a Wallace and Ladmo on TV?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, because I moved here long after they had shut down.
Yeah.
But it was still exciting to see them on TV. All right. Question 4. One of Pac-Man's earliest and first regularly appearing characters was Captain Zumar.
So, you know, it was like Wallace always wanted to antagonize the kids. So he had this character, and the key to this character is that he evolved from plant life instead of animal life. And he was really, really smug about it. I think these were early signs of Gerald. So he was constantly telling people, I can't remember the name of his planet right now. It'll come to me as soon as I stop trying to remember it. But he was, constantly telling the audience how his planet, his people, were far superior to Earthlings or anything that we had to do, because they evolved from plant life. And the last little obscure dot that I would like to put on this is the helmet that Captain Zumar is wearing later became the head of Gerald's monster. Wallace never threw away anything, and he found a way to reuse everything. So he glued fur to the outside of that space helmet, and it became the head of Gerald's monster. I always used to say, "Bring me the head of Gerald's monster." So,
and you could, because it was a helmet.
It was a separate piece.
So what wasn't the planet he was from, like Zork?
Yes, there you go.
Because it's like when I first heard that, I was like, it made me think of Mork from Ork, and it was so close. And I was like, wow, I wonder if there's a connection in anything.
There could be a connection. I mean, I'm not sure Robin Williams was born yet,
but someone else could have been.
Yes, true.
So, and likely was born. I'm sure many people were born.
Yes.
So.
Big hair reverse.
All right. So another of Pac-Man's early characters on the Wallace Ladmo show was Elmer Blisco. And what was Elmer? He was a caveman inventor.
So the trick of this Elmer Blisco bit was that he would bring on an existing object, a familiar object that everyone would know, like a chair or a lamp or something. And he would claim that he had just invented this, and whatever he was going to say it was supposed to do would be the exact opposite of what it was supposed to do. So if it was a chair, no way on earth was it for sitting on. It was for hanging. You turned it upside down, you could hang 4 hats on it, or something like that. And then it was very formulaic, and Wallace would go, wait a minute, what would happen if you turn the chair upside down, and now you got the 4 long things on the floor, and you got this big flat spot on top? You done that. And that was it. that was Elmer Blisco. That was all he that was the key to every Elmer Blisco bit. But what I loved is that Pat played this caveman as if he was a used car salesman. He was very slick. He was very smooth. He'd bring on this bag. Look at this. It's a duffel bag. Isn't that great? You put your duffel in it. Look at that. Doesn't that sing to you? So it was just a very funny take on a caveman, because he was like this jaded car salesman.
That's I've never heard that story. So all right. So just before Captain Super would make his appearance on the show, Wallace would summon him with a magic wand and the secret word, justice. He had but 2 sworn enemies, Communist and Eddie Boswell. So where did Captain Super fall on the political spectrum?
He was somewhere to the far, 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 far right of Barry Goldwater. He was, conservative to absurdity. And I just, once again, to come back to this particular take on the Wallace and Ladmo show, the kid show, a kid's television show, in the middle of the Cold War, I mean dead center in the middle of the Cold War, would be making jokes about communism was just insane. And they weren't, pardon me, they weren't just making jokes about communism. They were making jokes about people who opposed communism, which is who Captain Super was. He thought everybody was a communist. He would come on the show and there would be a bunch of winners sitting on a bench, and he'd point at the kid and say, "That's not a kid, that's a communist in a midget suit." And it was just relentless. So Wallace came up with the idea. He created this fictional Wallace watcher named Eddie Boswell. And Eddie Boswell started a letter writing campaign into the Wallace and Ladmo show about that Captain Super was a fake, a phony, crazy, not rational, shouldn't trust him, all that kind of stuff. Kind of like the QAnon people that we hear about today. So, of course, this infuriated Captain Super. And he would go on these tears about Eddie Boswell. Eddie Boswell was supposed to be an 11-year-old kid, about what an evil, horrible, vile person Eddie Boswell was, to the point that they actually, I don't know whose kid it was, but they finally broke down and had Eddie Boswell appear on the TV show. And Wallace and Ladmo had to grab Captain Super to stop him from beating up this 11-year-old kid. And then in Mike Condello's brilliant parody of Sgt. Pepper, he wrote "A Day on the Tube." And Eddie Boswell is immortalized in that song. Eddie Boswell was on to him. They got away with doing really biting political humor on a kids' television show that the adults got, that the kids had no idea what they were talking about other than they thought Captain Super was stupid. And it will nothing like that will ever be done again. I just don't see how it could be.
Well, and that was the thing. I mean, it was like growing up with Cowboy Bob, who it really was a vehicle for commercials and cartoons.
Right.
But it's like, but seeing a Wallace and Ladmo show, it really hit not just kids, but adults as well. So
my God. Yeah.
you could watch it and take something.
My mother would often, between cartoons, when they were doing a sketch, my mother would often step in and watch. And I noticed that, and I couldn't exactly figure out why. At the time, I couldn't figure out why. And then I realized, they were writing on two levels, and my mom was getting the stuff that was up here, and I was getting the other stuff that was down below.
Indeed. All right. So question 7. Wallace's actual name was Bill Thompson. His uncle was very successful in mining and became known as the Copper Baron of Arizona, who donated land for public use. Today it is known as Boyce Thompson Arboretum.
Yeah, so what got Wallace out to Arizona? He grew up in upstate New York. What got him out here was that he had family members out here, and one of them was Boyce Thompson. And Boyce Thompson made a lot of money mining copper in Arizona. And so he came out here, liked Arizona, liked the idea of the cowboy figure, riding horses, miles of wide open land in the valley. It was a very attractive place for a young man. So Boyce Thompson, being sort of our Andrew Carnegie or somebody like that, said, okay, here, I got this big, huge mother tract of land. I'm going to donate this to the state and do with it what you want. So they built the Boyce Thompson Arboretum. And if you've never been out there, boy, if you like desert botanical gardens, you really should go to the Boyce Thompson Arboretum, because it is like the botanical gardens, but different and enormous.
Right.
And ironically, there is something at the Boyce Thompson Arboretum called the Wallace Garden. It has zero connection to Bill Thompson and Wallace. It was another.
Oh, because I saw that and I was wondering. I was like, is there a connection between Wallace
zero? There was another guy who worked at the Boyce Thompson Arboretum when it was first established, and worked there so long that they took a fairly large plot of land and dedicated it to him, and his name happened to be Wallace. Coincidence.
Now, what is this about a pistachio tree?
Yes. When Ladmo passed away, they went out and planted a pistachio tree. It is called the Ladmo tree. Wallace and Pat were there. And if you get out there, you will find it. It is prominently displayed as part of the Boyce Thompson Arboretum. So Ladmo gets his own tree. Wallace gets nothing, but there is a Wallace garden.
Right. There's some irony going on there.
He would have liked that. I think Wallace would have really liked that.
All right. So Ladmo was a huge fan of baseball, and he was a good player. In fact, he was scouted by a professional MLB team who was the Cleveland Indians. So
Lad played baseball in the Ohio area there. He was a standout. He was scouted by the Indians, and they said, there's a university in Arizona that has a really good baseball program. You should go out there and enroll, and it will be a great way for you to get an education and to develop your baseball skills. So he comes out. I mean, this is classic Wallace and Ladmo. He comes out to Arizona and ends up in Tempe and enrolls at ASU and is an adequate player. I mean, more than an adequate player, very good player, gets on the ASU team. And once he gets on the team, he calls back the scout in Cleveland and said, hey, I just wanted to let you know I'm in Arizona and I got on the team and I am a Sun Devil. And the guy said to him, what the hell are you doing in Tempe? You're supposed to be in Tucson. Of course, he meant University of Arizona. So I don't know the whys and wherefores, but for some reason, Ladd stayed at ASU for 4 years, played baseball for them every year, and at a time when they could barely afford uniforms. And literally the day after he graduated with a degree in journalism, applied at KPHO and was hired the day after he graduated, and worked at that television station for his entire life of working for somebody else.
Wow. And nowadays that's unheard of, having one employer throughout your entire life.
Yeah. Back then it could happen. Today, no, probably not.
Right. All right. Question 9. Pat McMahon appeared on the Wallace and Ladmo show as a rock and roll singer, a hubcap, with his band The Wheels. It was the Steve Allen Show.
Easily the most popular television show on TV. Are you going to play the clip?
I am.
Okay, then I'll shut up.
All right.
Hubcap and The Wheels to play this program tonight. You lose interest in the movie. But they have a recording out now which is attracting a lot of attention from the FBI, ladies and gentlemen. Here's what it looks like. There we are, Hubcap and The Wheels. Songs are Boney Maroney, Sigh, Cry, and Almost Die. This is becoming a sort of a Friday night custom here on the show. We check the charts, the fever charts, not the regular charts. We find the hottest group in the business, and then we go get somebody else. And tonight, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great heart. Are you all set? Ready to go? How can you tell when they say yes? Ladies and gentlemen, you may have heard why you think the Beatles are exciting. These fellas run over the Beatles. Here they are, Hubcap and the Wheel.
Unbelievable. So, I mean, here's the thing. Steve Allen I'm not sure if he was born here, but I know he was raised here. He graduated from Phoenix Union High School. His first job in broadcasting was on KOY radio. By the time he had landed in Los Angeles and hosted the very first, what we now call the Tonight Show, he knew what Hubcap was about, but he was presenting it in a degree of seriousness that was meant to parody what had just happened with the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show. So, and the funny thing is, what kills me about that clip is not even their performance so much as the audience, because it's what happened in Phoenix. Everybody in Phoenix knew Hubcap was Pat McMahon, but we were all in on this elaborate joke, so that when he came on stage, the audience would scream like it was Elvis Presley, because, as I said in the play, The Wallace and Ladmo Show, for Phoenix, at that time, Wallace and Ladmo was as good as it got. And we knew that. And we were okay with that, because we knew the Beatles and the Rolling Stones were never going to play Phoenix. So when he goes to Los Angeles, here he is on national television, and those girls in the audience are doing the exact same thing. You can see on their faces, they're smiling and laughing as they're screaming, because it's all this put-up job of pretending to be, oh my God, it's Hubcap. So that was a really, really interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, I mean, because even listening to the clip, you can hardly even hear them because of the crowd screaming so loud for them.
Right. But they knew what was up. They were in on the joke as well. And it's like mass hysteria. It's so funny to see all these people going, oh, I get it. This guy's supposed to be a rock star, so we should scream our lungs out and act like we worship him. And they all did it. They all did it.
So did they become famous as Hubcap and the Wheels?
I would say, having not been there, but having had a chance to talk to McMahon about this a lot, Pat McMahon, one of the things that, by the way, they were signed with Capitol Records. And Capitol Records at that time was, they were the Amazon of records. If you were signed with them, that was a huge deal. Anyway, the guys from Capitol told him, if you're ever out in public, if you're ever making an appearance, if you're ever talking to anyone, if you're in the recording studio recording a record, you cannot be Pat McMahon. You must be Hubcap 24/7. And by the way, these other guys in the band are not allowed to talk to anyone. And they too must remain in this gear, this, Wheels gear.
Wow.
And at that point, I think the luster started to fade for them, and the idea of being a rock star. And this is what the play that I wrote about the Wallace and Ladmo Show is what this hinges on. What is success? Is success going to Los Angeles and being a rock star? Or is success being in Phoenix and doing a kids' television show that people idolize? And really, the Wallace and Ladmo Show was truly idolized. And he chose the latter. And that is an interesting story. I don't care if you know anything about the Wallace and Ladmo Show. Given those two choices, the decision on that and why you would make that decision, I think is something that anyone could relate to. Because as I said, to me, that play asked the question, what is success? What is your idea of success? And Marshall, your idea of success and my idea of success and anybody else's are likely to be quite different.
Right.
And it all revolved around this bizarro kid show. So I just thought it was a fun story.
Indeed, it is a fun story. So we are sadly at our last question of the night. So which of the celebrities did not appear on Wallace and Ladmo? Orson Welles. All those other people did. Wow.
Here's the story the way it was told to me by Wallace. He's sitting in his office one day and the phone rings. He picks up the phone and says, hello. And the voice on the other end of the phone sounds exactly like Orson Welles. Hello, this is Orson Welles. I'd like to speak to the actor who plays Captain Super. Wallace went click and went back to what he was doing. 5 minutes later, the phone rings again. And this time it's a woman. And she says, hello, my name is so-and-so, and I am Mr. Wells' personal secretary, and he would like to speak to the actor who plays Captain Super on the Wallace and Ladmo show. Now, this is about the most improbable thing that you could come up with, right? I mean, Orson Welles, what the hell? So at this point, now that it's been 2 calls, Wallace thinks, I better tell Pat. Hey, Pat, you got a phone call. Who is it? Well, she says that she's Orson Welles' secretary. Now, the background of this is Wallace loved to play practical jokes on Pat McMahon. At one point, Wallace sent a letter to the manager of the Beatles requesting that when they made their American tour, Hubcap and the Wheels could be an opening act for the Beatles. Now, he really sent that letter off, okay? And what he was hoping and praying for is that he was going to get a rejection letter, which he got. So he took the letterhead and whited it out and rewrote the whole thing about, oh, Hubcap and the Wheels, yes, we've heard of them. We would love to have them open for the Beatles on their next tour. And so he had a canceled stamp, an envelope, a letter of, yes, we want Hubcap and the Wheels. And he handed it to Pat, and Pat opened it and read it and went ballistic, thinking that he was going to open for the Beatles. And Wallace told me that he heard Pat on the phone talking with his bank about getting a second mortgage on his house so that he could finance this thing with the Beatles. And Wallace said, stop. It was a joke. It was just a joke. They never sent you a letter. They don't want you guys. And it damn near blew up their relationship. It damn near exploded their relationship. So the reason I told that story is because when Wallace said, hey, Orson Welles' secretary is on the phone and he wants to talk to you, Pat's like, yeah, right. Gets on the phone, talks to the lady. They ask him to meet them under the Tempe Bridge in the riverbed before Town Lake existed. So they said, okay. So Wallace and Pat actually go together, drive down there to this meeting outdoors, and up pulls this big stretch limo. The driver gets out, opens the door. Pat still told me, I'm still thinking this is a joke. He climbs into the back seat of the limousine, and there's frickin' Orson Welles. He says, I'm shooting this movie here in town. It's called The Other Side of the Wind. Your character of Captain Super reminded me of one of the characters we have in the film, and I would like you to play this character. So he did. And The Other Side of the Wind is on Netflix, and you can see it. And I can tell you that Pat has a much larger role than I had anticipated. I think a much larger role than Pat anticipated. He's in that film quite a bit. And so Orson Welles never made it onto the Wallace and Ladmo show, but he hired McMahon to be in Other Side of the Wind. It's just another one of those bizarro coincidences. So,
indeed. Now, I think, wasn't there also some issue with like funding of that movie or something? Like it had started at one point and then stopped. And
oh yeah, that movie was being shot by the seat of its pants, and out in Carefree at a house that they had. Orson Welles had talked somebody into loaning him one of those Carefree mansions, and there's a documentary about the making of that movie on Netflix as well, and it's called They'll Love Me When I'm Dead. And it's about the making of The Other Side of the Wind. So I would recommend looking at both of those. If you have any interest in Orson Welles, it's really interesting, and it was his last film. And I won't go into all the details, but the reason the film wasn't released until recently is another whole bizarre story in itself that involves the Shah of Iran, I'm not kidding, and a bunch of other stuff, and it was just crazy. And then finally, they were able to get the original reels a few years ago and edit and piece the whole thing together. Yeah, it's interesting. John Huston is the lead in that film, and it's a really interesting film.
Indeed, and full of good stories.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, you have the trailer there, don't you?
Yeah, actually, I was just getting ready to click on that.
You can't afford the Ernest Hemingway of the cinema.
I just want to know what he represents.
Man is invested with disciples. I'm the apostle. Just like me and God. How could you tell us apart?
His new movie?
The Other Side of the Wind.
What's that about the movie?
We don't talk about the movie. So you old guys are trying to get with it. Is that what this movie's about? Well, we don't actually know. What do we know? Jake is just making it up as he goes along. He's done it before. Movies and friendship. Those are best friends.
Mr. Hannaford, will you please slow down? Mr. Hannaford!
What he creates, he has to wreck. It's a compulsion. Want me to bring you another scotch?
Whatever, our movies. A real movie. Well, here it is. If anybody wants to see it.
That is Peter Bogdanovich in the film as well, if you didn't recognize him. A powerhouse director of his own, appearing in Orson Welles' film.
Indeed. So, Ben,
yes,
we're coming to a close. So, are you working on any new projects or anything?
I am. I actually have one finished, and I'm working on one, and they both fit in that little tiny niche that I was talking about at the beginning of all this, Arizona contemporary history. So the first one, which is completed, at least, if it ever gets produced, I'm sure there'll be changes, is called The Truth About Winnie Ruth Judd. The title of that play is meant to be ironic because the truth will never be known about Winnie Ruth Judd.
Right.
However, it is the story of that double homicide that some of you may know. Jana Boomersbach, an Arizona treasure, wrote the Bible on that story. Ours is a little bit different, and it was inspired by about 2 sentences in Jana's book. What I learned and later researched on my own outside of her book is that when the trial of Winnie Ruth Judd was taking place, Jack Williams, who was working at KOY Radio, previously mentioned as the place where Steve Allen worked, had somebody sitting in the courtroom, and they would write down the day's proceedings and then at night they would bring it back over to KOY, and they would recreate the day's courtroom proceedings on the radio with actors on a signal that at that time in 1933 could be picked up from Hawaii to Newfoundland. So they were basically covering the northern hemisphere with radio recreations of the trial of Winnie Ruth Judd. And that was the key. That I said, that's the way to tell this story, from that perspective, from that point of view. And it's also told out of a sync, out of time, in timeline. Don't ask me to be objective, but I really like it. It's a story. I mean, Winnie Ruth Judd is somebody I've heard about since I was a little kid.
Right.
So there's that. One that I am working on right now. I have never written. I've written a lot of plays, but I've never written a farce, and I've always wanted to write a farce. A farce, for those of you who are not familiar with the name, is a play with a lot of mistaken identity, slamming doors, people in and out of rooms, crazy, hectic behavior. In film, they used to call them screwball comedies. But this is a farce that is based on a very famous photograph. There's a picture of Mae West sitting in a stretch Lincoln limousine in front of the Orpheum Theater for the opening of She Done Him Wrong. And my wife and I, when we were married 27 years ago, stayed at the San Carlos Hotel. And there on the front desk, they had displayed this photograph. And I said to the desk clerk, wow, that's a great picture of Mae West. And he said to me, that's not really Mae West.
Oh.
And I said, you're kidding me. And I looked at it closer and I thought, she's a little skinny. And her boobs aren't maybe the right size. And then that started my head turning. Mae West actually did stay at the San Carlos. When my wife and I stayed there on our wedding night, we stayed in the Mae West suite. But then I started thinking about this thing, a hotel. Everyone thinks Mae West is coming to town, only it's not really Mae West. And that's what got the gears turning in my head about all this. And so I am writing a farce called Go West. And it is about what I found out by research is that the studio, Paramount, went out and hired a whole bunch of Mae West lookalikes, put them in limousines, and had them drive around theaters in the towns where the film was opening. And everyone thought, oh my God, Mae West is in town. Only she wasn't. So that is the little framework of this play that I'm working on. And I'm having so much fun with it. It's historically based, but I don't have to be historically accurate.
Right. Well, because there's so little information about that. It's kind of like you get the bare bones, so
Right.
that sets your structure up. But then you can really have fun, kind of playing with those.
I think I have found.
Oh my gosh, Ben! Thank you so much for being here and sharing so many amazing stories. And I know you have a lot more stories, but
You know what? I'll tell you something, Marshall. It seems like a very narrow window of something to write about. But I always get this feeling there will be so much that I'll never be able to get to. My focus is just headed that direction. So,
well, no, I agree. As people say, it's like, well, why don't you do wider than just Arizona? And I'm like, because there's so many amazing stories in Arizona that people don't know.
Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for being on and for being one of our guests. Thank you so much and have a great evening.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So now that we've gone through all that, if you didn't think you should click on share because you're thinking, what is this? What's going on? Well, maybe now you'll feel like clicking on that share button and sharing. It'll share all this fun that we've just had with Ben and some of those amazing stories. So, yeah, oh my gosh, we could have gone on for hours and hours, and we have before, but all right. So now we come to a portion that is sponsored by the First Films of Arizona. You can find them on Facebook and as well as their own website. You can track them down. And this is a segment called Little Arizona. Now, a lot of you might know, so, I talk about how I moved here from New York. Well, I actually grew up in a little tiny town in Indiana of about 25 people. 2 roads, 1 stop sign, not a lot going on. And so a while ago, a publisher actually reached out to me and said, hey, would you like to do a book called Little Arizona, really looking at some of those small towns across Arizona? Because for me, part of the magic of being here is not just living in such a big city, but being easily accessible to tiny towns across the state. And so tonight we are going to be talking about Sun Sites, Arizona. It is in Cochise County, population of 1,032. Founded in 1961, well, kind of maybe the 50s, 60s, kind of like that. Now, Sun Sites is basically adjacent to, I would say, a modern ghost town. So it's historic Pierce, Arizona, which started off as, again, like most places, a mining town. And so it was actually named after a Cornish gentleman named James Pierce, who was a miner and a cattleman. He happened to discover some gold and put in the Commonwealth mine. Now, then the railroad came in 1903, and it was a booming metropolis. In fact, there indeed still stands the Commonwealth Mine House. They also have the general store from 1896, as well as even the church from 1916 there in Pierce. Now, pretty much you think, what? I mean, oh, and even the jail for all those folks doing illicit things. Oh my gosh. So basically, the economy of both of these towns is retirees and tourism. That's kind of what keeps people coming back to Pierce and wanting to live and be a part of that 1,000 people that live in Sun Sites. And you might wonder, well, you've got these old buildings. What else is there to do? Well, there's a lot to do. And a lot of it revolves around not just the cemetery, where you can see where a lot of the folks, the farmers, the gamblers, the homesteaders, the laborers, oh, that made it what it is. But it is the Coronado National Forest. Now you have Cochise's stronghold, which is basically, for about 15 years, Cochise, who at that point was chief of the Navajo Nation, and I'm sorry, not Navajo, Apache. He was Chiricahua Apache chief. And so as they were being forced off their land or driven off their land, he would get captured, but would escape and would make their way, him and his followers would make their way to this stronghold where they basically survived for about 15 years. I mean, if you want to go to a place that looks other unworldly, I mean, over in the Chiricahuas, part of that, it's just amazing. And then a little further, you go and you get the Sandhill Crane Refuge of the Whitewater Draw. So in the wintertime, this is where the cranes come and relax, kind of their resort. But then you also have the preserve that is just beautiful. So that's why so many people go there, for the old buildings and getting a chance to spend time in the Cochise Park, which has so much to go through. So I can hardly, last time I went to the Chiricahuas, again, was on a timeline and didn't get to spend as much time as I wanted to, but I look forward to getting a chance to go back and just kind of hanging out. So next week, I am happy to say, next our guest will be Peter Corbett, who was historian on Route 66 on so much. He's done work with Marshall Trimble. It's going to be a super fun show. A lot of it's going to focus on that northern part, or those folks that are getting snow right now. So it's going to be a lot of fun and really cool and not just because of the weather. So remember, if you have any comments, stories, or suggestions, feel free to throw them out to me. You can do that either via Facebook, Instagram, or email. And so, again, don't forget there is our March 13th Second Saturday Tour of downtown Phoenix. Now with Peter, we will be right here where you're watching us now on next Thursday at 7 o'clock. So same bat time, same bat channel, and we'll be talking about Arizona history. I always give a shout out to the intro that was done by my friend Chris, who wrote the music, Cole, who wrote the music, Chris, who did the video, and my cocktail ambassador, PJ, who created the Ladmo bag for the Hotel Valley Ho that you'll be able to get there at the Hotel Valley Ho, especially as a poolside drink. It'll be quite phenomenal. Now, we also have our outro, which is music from Mr. Ho, who is a hometown boy now living on the East Coast with his own Orchestrotica band. So thank you so much and have a great rest of your night.